Hello everyone, I am Chaos from HEster 13, and well, if it's me, we all know it's not a normal video. Unfortunately, I keep underestimating editing a video with Annie P, so that's getting pushed back again. But in the meantime, here's me playing Don't Starve, while I tell you all about Heracles. Or as most people know about him, Hercules. Disney. Okay, so I had to fight the urge to put in a picture of the muses, because, well, copyright. That is a video idea for later. Facts about copyright. How copyright works. Anyways. So Heracles. And no, you are not hearing me wrong. It is Heracles, as in Hera, even though he's a son of Zeus. It was the Romans who actually started calling him Hercules. He was named after Hera in an attempt to please her. That didn't really work out for poor old Heracles. Why, one may ask? Well, real quick, if you don't want Disney's Hercules to be absolutely ruined for you, I may suggest leaving this video or muting it. I do die in this, so it's kind of funny. So I'm going to give you a moment to either click away or mute me. Okay, assuming I am either muted or you have clicked away or you want to know what I am about to say, Hera cursed Heracles to go mad or crazy, and while he ended up unaliving his children, the children he had with Princess Megara. Fun fact, they do end up together. So in order to atone, fancy word for make up for his sins, he had to take up 10 labors set by the king, whose name I cannot pronounce, and I will not ever attempt to pronounce because I will undoubtedly F it up. Heracles would actually become famous for these labors, which are often referred to as the 12 labors of Heracles or Hercules. I did say 10 just seconds ago, but, well, you'll find out why there are technically 12 later. So let's get into them. First labor up is the Nemean lion. Quick reminder to everyone, never do the things that ancient heroes of Greece did because, it's not safe. And well, these are just stories. If you do want to do some of these things, might I suggest taking up D&D or a really fun video game. Anyways, so, first task is the Nemean lion. The king has set Hercules out to bring forth this lovely lion skin of this impenetrable lion skin to, back to the king. So, after being given this intense labor, he is on his way, and he comes to a small town where he stays in a house of a workman for hire. His host offers to sacrifice an animal to pray for a safe lion hunt, but Heracles asks him to wait 30 days. If the hero returns with the lion skin, they would sacrifice to Zeus, the king of the gods, Hercules' father. If Heracles dies, well, he asks that he sacrifice instead to him as a hero. When he got to Nemea and began tracking the lion, he soon discovered that his arrows were useless against the beast. He picked up his club and went after the lion. Neither went well. He, however, followed it to a cave that had 2 entrances. He blocked one of the doorways and then approached the lion through the other. Grasping the lion in his arms and then ignoring its claws, he held it tightly until it choked. And, well, was slayed. Hercules then returned to his friends, carrying the dead lion, and it was on the 30th day after he left for the hunt. So they sacrificed together to Zeus. When Hercules made it back to Macan, the king was amazed that the hero had managed an impossible task. He then became afraid of Hercules and forbade him from entering through the gates of the city, Furthermore, the king had a large bronze jar made and buried partway in the earth, where he could hide from Hercules, if need be. After that, the king sent his commands to Heracles through a herald, refusing to see the hero face to face. Which brings us to the second task. The Lyrian Hydra. Just gotta check how far I am in here. Okay. The Hydra. The second labor was to slay the Lernaean Hydra. From murky waters of the swamps near a place called Lernia, the Hydra would rise up and terrorize the countryside. A monster serpent with 9 heads. And it attacked with poisonous venom. I can get behind that. It wasn't an easy beast to slay, for one of its 9 heads was immortal and therefore indestructible. Heracles set off to find the 9-headed menace, but he didn't go alone. He grabbed his nephew and took him along. He apparently shared many adventures with his uncle and accompanied him on many of the 12 labors. Legend has it that his nephew won a victory in chariot racing at the Olympics, and he's often depicted as Heracles' charioteer. So, the pair drove to Lernia, and by the springs of Amani, they discovered the lair of the Hydra. First, Heracles lured the creature from the safety of its own den by shooting arrows. Well, that's just mean. If you were shooting flaming arrows at me, I'd come out waving a knife or something. But anyways, once the Hydra emerged, Heracles seized it. The monster was not easily overcome, though, for it wound one of its coils around his foot and made it impossible for the hero to escape. With his club, Heracles attacked the many heads of the Hydra, but as soon as he smashed one head, 2 more would burst forth in its place. That doesn't sound fun. And to make it worse, the Hydra had a little friend of its own, a crab, that began biting the trapped foot of the hero. Quickly disposing of the poor crab with his club, Hercules called on his nephew to help him out. Each time that Hercules bashed in one of the Hydra's heads, his nephew would hold a torch to the headless tendons in the neck, and the flames prevented the growth of replacing heads. And eventually, Heracles got better of the beast. Once he removed and destroyed the 8 mortal heads, he chopped off the 9th. He buried that on the side of the road, and for good measure, he covered it with a heavy rock. As for the rest of the poor Hydra, Heracles split open the corpse and dipped its arrows in its venomous blood. Those will come in handy later. Now for the 3rd labor. The next labor was to bring back the hind of Serena. Okay, so really quick. A hind is actually a red female deer. Why is that important, you may ask? Well, it's Artemis's pet deer. It's a sacred animal with golden horns and hooves of bronze, so to bring it back to the king would be a task, because, well, I wouldn't want to hurt a goddess's pet, and neither would he. He knew he couldn't shoot the deer, or he'd be in a bigger mess than he already was. He then, however, set out to track the deer. He tracked it for a whole year, and at last he found the deer when it had become wary of the chase. She looked for a rest on a mountain named after Artemis. She then made her way to the river Ladon. Realizing that the deer was about to get away, Heracles shot her just as she was about to cross. He caught the deer, put her on her shoulders, and turned his way back to his country. However, as he turned this way, he was met by Artemis and Apollo. Artemis was frankly angry because Heracles had attempted to kill her sacred animal. She was about to take the deer away from Heracles, and she surely would have punished him, but he told her the truth and said he had to obey the oracle and do the labors. that the king had given him. Artemis, knowing the oracle, and knowing how one must obey even fate, let go of her anger and healed the deer's wound. Hercules then carried it alive back to the king. So, the next task, number 4 of these 12 tasks, we're about a quarter of the way here, was the boar. Every day a boar would come crashing down from its lair, attacking men and animals all over the countryside, gouging them with its tusks and destroying everything in its path. And then the boar does that, but this is a massive boar, easily 2 men tall. So on his way to hunt the boar, Hercules stopped to visit with his friend, a centaur that lived in a cave near the boar's home. Heracles was hungry and thirsty, and so the kindly centaur cooked for Hercules, and they drank some wine. However, the wine was belonged to all of the centaurs, and when they came to his friend's cave and were armed with rocks and fir trees. So Heracles grabbed some burning sticks from the fireplace and threw them at the centaurs. They went after him with his club. He shot arrows at the rest of them and chased them for about 20 miles. The rest of the centaurs fled. One of the centaurs, Charon, received a wound that no amount of medicine would heal. But what happened to him is another story. And anyone who's read Percy Jackson knows that very specific centaur. Anyone who knows Greek myths knows why he's so important. His friend, while he was gone, pulled an arrow from the body of one of the centaurs. He wondered why a little thing could kill a creature so big when suddenly it slipped from his hand, fell on his foot, and killed him. So when Heracles returned, he found his friend dead. He buried his friend and then proceeded to hunt the boar. It wasn't too hard for Heracles to find the boar. He could hear the beast snoring and stomping as it rooted around for something to eat. He chased the boar around and around the mountain, shouting as loud as he could. The boar, frightened and out of breath, hid in a thicket. Poked a spear in the thicket and drove out the exhausted animal into a deep patch of snow. He then trapped the boar and carried it all the way back to the king. The king was again amazed and frightened by the hero's power, hid in his partially buried bronze jar. He would actually go on, I believe, to let the boar go, the king would, so that it would rampage through the city yet again. It would eventually end up in Marathon. Another story for another time. Now the 5th. He was then given another task. The 5th task. Heracles was ordered to clean up another king's stables. The hero knew that this would mean getting dirty and smelly, and even sometimes a hero has to do these things. So clean your room, kids. I sounded straight up like a... Ew. I hated that for me. Anyways, so the task was made even harder because he had to clean up after the cattle in a single day. Now this king, King Aegeus, owned more cattle than anyone in Greece. Some say he was the son of one of the Greek gods, and others he was the son of a mortal. Whoever he was very rich and had many herds of cows, goats, bulls, sheep, and horses. And every night, the cowherds, goatherds, and shepherds would drive thousands of animals to the stables. Heracles went to this king, and without telling him anything about the other, said that he would clean out the stables in one day, if Aegeus would give him 1/10 of his fine cattle. Aegeus couldn't believe his ears, but he promised Heracles and brought his son along to watch. First, Heracles tore an opening in the wall of the cattle yard where the stables were. Then he made another opening in the wall on the opposite side of the yard. He then dug wide trenches so that the two rivers that flowed nearby turned course and went through the yard. They rushed through the stables, flushing them out, and the mess flowed out of the hole on the other side of the yard. Heracles never did get his payment, but he did get kicked out of that country for good. Alright. Next labor is the birds. Disclaimer for this one is shorter than the rest because birds and I don't get along. Birds are evil. So after he returned from his success at the stables, the king came up with an even more difficult task. For the sixth labor, Heracles was to drive away an enormous flock of birds, which gathered at the lake near the town of, I can't pronounce that, Stimafalo. Yeah, I'm not even pronouncing that. And arriving at this lake, which was deep in the woods, Heracles had no idea how to drive the huge gathering of birds away. The goddess Athena came to his aid, providing a pair of bronze noise-making clappers. You know those hand clappers? Imagine those made of bronze. These were no ordinary ones, however, because they had been made by HEster, the god of the forge and fire. Climbing a nearby mountain, he clashed that hand clapper loudly, scaring the birds out of the trees, and then shot them with a bow and arrow, possibly a slingshot, and they took flight. Thus, he scared the birds away from the lakes. After that, he was then sent on business away to Crete to deal with the Cretan bull. At this time, actually, never mind. It is not the boar, it is the Cretan bull that was released back towards Marathon near Athens. Gotta stick to my script here. I have a script to remind me of all of the fun little details, because if I don't, I will fudge up. But after the business with the birds, Heracles was sent to Crete. At the time, Minos was the king of Crete. He controlled many islands near the seas around Greece, and was the most powerful ruler that the Athenians had sent tribute to him every year. There are many stories about the bull in Crete. Zeus, in the shape of a bull, had carried Minos' mother Eurypa to Crete, and the Cretans were fond of the sport of bull leaping, which contestants grabbed the horns of the bull or were thrown over its back. Minos, in order to proclaim to his throne, had promised the sea god Poseidon that he'd sacrifice whatever the god sent him from the sea. Poseidon sent a bull, so he was to sacrifice a bull. But, well, he didn't, and that's a story about the Minotaur. However, when Hercules got to Crete, he easily wrestled the bull to the ground and drove it back to the king, who let the bull go free. And it wandered around Greece, terrifying people, and ended up in Marathon, near Athens. That one's a little less clear. There's not a lot on the bull, but it is the 7th labor, and it is one of the labors that did not get discredited by the king. So, after the capture of the Cretan bull, the king sent him on another labor. This one's a little scarier because it involves man-eating horses. So after that, he had to bring back the mares of Diomedes, man-eating horses, back to the king. Heracles sailed all the way there, and he had to free himself, got into a fight, freed himself, and entrusted the mares to a young man. Unfortunately, the mares got the better of the young man and dragged him around until he was gone. Meanwhile, Hercules got into another tussle, killed the rightful owner of the horses, and made the rest flee. He then founded a city, and he took the mares back to the king of Mycenae. who let them go. And the mares wandered around until they came to a Mount Olympus, where they were eaten by wild beasts. This king is not very responsible. He's a very unresponsible king. I do not like him. We do not like him. We do not like him at all. He's quite rude. So I'm going to take a quick drink. This man has done a lot of labors. A lot of atonement here. I think I'd rather just say some Hail Marys. Okay. For the 9th flavor, the king, who I will tell, Eurystheus, there I finally said his name, ordered Heracles to bring him the belt of Hippolyte, who was the queen of the Amazons. Oh jeez, I would cry if I was this man. I would not want to fight the queen of the Amazons. Who wants to fight the queen of the Amazons? They're called the Amazons for a reason. The Amazons obviously lived apart from men, and it was a female-only society. The queen had a special piece of armor. It was a leather belt that had been given to her by Ares, the war of God, because she was the best warrior of the Amazons. Wow. Only dude that they'll probably be friendly to. She wore this belt and used it to carry her sword and spear. The king wanted it so he could give it to his daughter. So he sent Heracles to bring it back. It's like so rude. Making a man steal for you. Commit one sin and have to commit a whole nother just to make up for it. Hercules realized he couldn't do it alone, because he has to fight the Amazons, had a bunch of friends join him, and they set sail on the ship. They reached the Amazons, got in harbor, and when the Greeks got off, the queen came down to visit them. She asked why he had come, and then he told her she promised to give him the belt. The goddess Hera knew that the arrival of Heracles meant nothing but trouble for the Amazons. Disguised as an Amazon warrior, Hera went up and down the army to saying to each of the women, the strangers who arrived were going to carry off the queen. So the Amazons put on their armor, went on horseback, and charged the ship. When Heracles saw this, he quickly drew his sword, murked the queen, undid her belt, and took it. They did battle with the Amazons, and then he sailed away. They stopped over at Troy for a little while, and then they returned to the original country and gave the belt to the king. He gave it to his daughter. Made a man steal for him. The 10th labor. What Heracles probably thought was going to be the last labor, and didn't end up being the last labor. He had to bring the cattle of the monster Geron to the king. This is a monster. A descendant of the Gorgons. He had 3 heads and 3 sets of legs, all joined at the waist. He lived on an island called Eurythia, which was near the boundary of Europe and Libya. He kept a herd of cattle guarded by Cerberus's brother. Yeah, Cerberus, the 3-headed hound, had a little brother, Orthus, who had 2 heads. So, unsure of how long it took him to get there. He bashed the guard dog and the herdsman. And just as Heracles was escaping with the cattle, he was attacked. And he fought him and shot him dead with his arrows. The cattle stealing was not a difficult task compared to bringing the herd back to Greece. 2 sons of Poseidon had tried to steal the cattle, a bull got loose and jumped into the sea, swam to Italy, and yeah, it landed in Italy. He left some of it. A bull actually leapt off the thing, so he had to go find it. He left the rest of the herd with HEster, found it, and then he had to challenge the new owner of the bull to a wrestling contest. He beat him 3 times, and he took back the bull and returned it to the herd. He made it to the edge of the Aegean Sea. And Hera, who was not about to let him accomplish, sent a gadfly to attack the cattle, who scattered far and wide. He had to run around gathering all of the escaped cows, and he finally regrouped the herds, and he finally gave it to the king. Yeah, he did actually end up sacrificing all of those cattle to Hera. But that's not so much fun. Alrighty. And so that's 10 labors. Hercules is done, right? No. Unfortunately, the king is refusing to accept 2 of the labors. The cleansing of the stables, or number 5, and the unaliving of the Hydra, number 2. So 2 more must happen. I told you there were 12. The reasons why the king did not accept the killing of the Hydra and the cleansing of the stables was the king was petty about the slaying of the Hydra. It was because Heracles had help, and then because he had found out that King Jaeus had promised to pay Heracles for the cleansing of the stables, so now he had to do 2 more. So let's get on to 11 and 12. I'm sure you're tired of my voice. Okay, so 11 is called the Golden Apples. So the king commanded Hercules to bring him golden apples, which belonged to Zeus. Hera had given these apples to Zeus as a wedding gift, so it was Hera. This man. It's not fun. So these were kept in a garden on the edge of the world, and were guarded by a 100-headed dragon named Ladon. Was also a group of nymphs that were the daughters of Atlas, the titan who's held the sky on his shoulders. His first problem was he didn't know where the garden was. He eventually found it by seizing a sea god who told him the location. So he found it. He was stopped by another sea god and challenged to a fight, which he won. He was captured and was going to be sacrificed, but he escaped and journeyed on. He managed to see Prometheus for a little bit. So he found Prometheus, who actually, when Hercules killed the eagle that was eating his liver day in and day out, told Heracles, I keep doing it, how to get the apples. He would have to send Atlas after them instead of going himself. Atlas hated holding up the Skyner so much that he would agree to the fetching the apples in order to pass his burden on. However, Atlas didn't want to take back the thing, so Heracles had to trick him back into taking the heavy load. so that he could continue on. It was uneventful, and he took them back to the king. However, the king could not keep the apples. After all, they belonged to the gods. So, after all the trouble that he went through, he had to return them. So he gave them to Athena, who took them back to the garden on the edge of the world. Now, number 12 is a favorite of mine. Because it is actually Cerberus. The most dangerous labor of all was the final one. The king ordered him to go to the underworld and kidnap Cerberus. So, Heracles went through it. He took some extra precautions, and went to speak to the god of the underworld. When he found him, he asked him for Cerberus. The lord of the underworld replied that Heracles could indeed take Cerberus with him, but only if he overpowered the beast with nothing more than his own brute strength. Weaponless, Heracles set off and encountered Cerberus. Undaunted, the hero threw his strong arms around the beast, perhaps grasping all three heads at once, and wrestled him into submission. The dragon tail of the doggo bit Heracles, but that did nothing to stop him. Cerberus submitted and brought Cerberus to the king. Unlike all the other monsters that had passed, Cerberus was returned safely to Hades, where he resumed guarding the underworld. He inflicted no lasting damage on Cerberus, except maybe a little bit to his pride. And with that, that is the 12 labors of Heracles. Or in other words, Chaos ruins Disney's Hercules, as I like to call it. This is HEster 13's Chaos, and I hope you all have a good night. Sleep tight, and don't do what Greek heroes would do. That's all I'm saying.